Indicator 5-4 is going to be a much like yesterday, standard form. The only difference is today we're going to introduce fractions into the equation. And since the rule, like we learned yesterday, is no negatives, no fractions, today, since there will be fractions in there, we need to get rid of them. And you guys already know how to do that. So I think this will be pretty easy. And like I said, we're only going to do 3 examples unless you guys feel like you need more. All right, so from a graph, we cannot go straight to standard form, but from a graph, we know we can do slope-intercept form. And anytime you're asked to write anything in a linear equation, if you don't have what it takes to write it in the one they're asking for, write it in a different one and then get there, okay? So RM, we're gonna rise 1. We're going to rise 1 because we're going to go from this point, and then we're going to have to go all the way over to here to get to another point. So rise 1 and go to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our slope here is 1/5. Our B is where our line crosses the y-intercept, and in this case, that is a +2. So I now have enough information. Okay, this is review all the way back from Tuesday. I have an M, I have a B. So generic Y equals my M, generic X, and then plus my B. Now that I have this, I can now get it to standard form because I'm in some linear form. Now I can start moving and grooving. The order that you do this doesn't matter. Eventually, I'm going to want to get, I know I'm going to want to get that negative off of the X, okay? I can move it first and then get the fraction off, or I can get the fraction off now. It doesn't really matter. But to get rid of the fraction, I would multiply that by a 5, right? To get rid of a fraction, you multiply by the denominator. Does everybody, we're good there, right? So to get rid of this, if I do it now, I'll show you here in a second. I'll show you both ways. That'll kind of clear up what I'm talking about. If I do it now, I'm going to multiply this whole term. Remember, multiplying means 1, right? Multiplying married, they're 1. So I just multiply that whole term once by a 5. This +2, remember pluses, they're not 1, they're their own term. So we're going to also multiply that by 5 and my Y by 5, because if I do it to one term, I have to do it to all terms. The 1/5 X is considered one term because multiplication is considered 1. So I end up with 5Y equals, that now cancels out, and I'm left with 1X, or just X. You don't have to write the 1. And then plus 10. Now I'm going to move my X and move my X. And when I do that, I get negative X plus 5Y equals, that's gone now, 10. And then the last step would be dividing off that negative, because I can't leave a negative out front. That's the other rule. Okay. And when I do that, I get my final answer is positive X, no fraction, no negative. So I'm good there. Minus 5Y equals negative 10. Okay, that's standard form. I'm not breaking either one of the rules, so I'm good. X comes first, then the Y, then equals, and then your whole number. If I said there's another way you can do it, so I'm going to go back to this step right here. Y equals 1/5 X plus 2. If I'm here and I want to move my X first, that's fine. It's a positive 1/5 X. So I'm going to go minus 1/5 X and minus 1/5 X on the other side. Okay. And when I do that, that whole term goes away, X's and all, and I'm left with negative 1/5 X plus Y equals 2. Now I still have to get rid of the fraction, and I can also see I even have a negative to get rid of. So you can do this in 1 or 2 steps. You can multiply everything by a 5, and it's going to leave you a negative 1X, a positive 5Y, and a positive 10. And then you can divide everything by a negative. Or if you can see it, like if you can kind of pull out a little bit and get a bigger view, if you can see that you need to get rid of your negative and your fraction at once, if I multiply this by negative 5, that means I multiply this by negative 5 and this by negative 5. What happens? The negative cancels to a positive, the 5s cancel out, and I'm left with positive 1X, or just positive X. And then Y times negative 5 is negative 5Y, and 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. And you'll notice, right, comparing the two, I got the exact same answer. It doesn't matter what order you do it, and it doesn't matter how many steps you break it down into. If multiplying by a -5 messes with you, multiply by a +5, and then you would have -5x, and then you would have to divide everything by a -1 to turn it into a positive, okay? Or I said -5x, I meant a 1x. If you just multiply by a negative or by a +5 at first, you'd be left with -1x, and you would still have to divide off that negative. Okay, break it down into however many steps make sense to you. All right, I'm going to skip this example. Don't think we need to do it. Let's go ahead and do this example. So this one is in point slope form. Y minus 4 equals -2/7 x plus 5. Some of these can get kind of ugly, and that's okay. All right, so we are going to distribute. We always get rid of parentheses before we do anything else. So we have y minus 4 equals -2/7 times x. Just write it just like that because we know it's okay to have a fraction in front of that x. And then if you need to out to the side, right, you've got 2 times 7 or 2/7 minus 2/7 times 5/1 equals -10/7. If it helps you to take this -2/7 times 5 and go out to the side and work it, that's fine. But you end up getting a -10/7. Now, this would be an instance where I would say get rid of the fraction first, because if you don't, you're going to have to rewrite -4 as -28/7. And then you're going to have to try to add that over to the -10/7. And it's just a whole lot of sevenths and a whole lot of fractions. So what I would do is I would multiply everything by 7 first. Now that means the y, the -4, you can't forget that, or else it's going to throw off your, because y minus 4, those are two separate terms, so they each get the 7. The -2/7 x is one term, so they get the 7. And then this -10/7 gets the 7. Everybody follow me there? Because I have denominators that are both 7s, get rid of them first. So what that leaves me is 7y minus 28 equals, cancels out, and I'm left with -2x, cancels out, and I'm left with -10. That looks a whole lot easier to start messing with, okay? I'm going to do it in one step here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2x and add 2x. I'm also going to add 28 to the left and add 28 to the right, because I want to get all my whole numbers over to the right and all my x's and y's over to the left. When I do that, I'm left with 2x plus 7y. That's gone. Equals, my 2x is gone from over here, and -10 and +28 is +18. And there's your answer. So when I say fractions really don't make it harder, they really don't if you just get rid of them from the beginning. Okay. What's my slope going to be here? 4. Let's do this one. I don't think that one. Let's do this one and we'll call it done. Except for let's change this slope to positive. Oops. I want to make this a positive. So we have a point going, we have our line going through 0, 5 with a slope of +9/2, 9/2. And again, you have two options here, and I don't know how you guys did it yesterday. You can either start in point slope form because you're given a point and a slope, or you can find your own b and then start in y equals mx plus b. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and start in point slope form, but either way, we'll get the same answer. Okay, so point slope form is y minus my given y equals my slope times x minus my given x. First things first, I distribute. And so I'm left with y minus 5 equals 9 over 2x. And then anything times 0 just stays a 0. And I don't care if you put plus 0, minus 0, it doesn't really matter because it's just 0. Now you can, because the 5 is whole, you can move it first if you want, or you can multiply everything by 2 first if you want. Here it doesn't matter. Like we had up here, when this n term is a fraction, I would definitely get rid of the fraction first. If the n term is a whole number like here, it doesn't matter. It's 6 to 1, half a dozen of the other. So if I go ahead and multiply everything times 2, that means this, 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 and of course, that's just going to stay 0, but we'll go ahead and put it on there. So the y gets the 2, the negative 5 gets the 2, the fraction gets the 2, and that n term gets the 2. The main thing to remember here is that you got to not forget that little negative 5 in there. Make sure that that one gets the 2 as well. So you're left with 2y minus 10 equals, that cancels out, which now your fraction's gone, and that just stays a 0. And in one step, I'm going to move everything. So I'm going to minus 9x and minus 9x. And I'm also going to add 10 and add 10. And that's going to give me negative 9x plus 2y equals 0 plus 10 is 10. And then, of course, I can't have that negative out front. So I'm going to run it through. And I have 9x minus 2y equals negative 10. Now, had you realized, forethought, right? Had you realized that when you moved your x over, you were going to have a negative, you could have, up at this step right here, you could have multiplied everything by a negative 2. I think that muddies the water a little bit, but I mean, it's the right way to do. I mean, it's one of the right ways to do it. It's just trying to think too many steps ahead sometimes can kind of bite you a little bit, because if you try to think too many steps ahead, sometimes you can overthink it and make a mistake. So if it were me, I would I would multiply everything by the positive 2 and then just do that little last step at the end of dividing by a negative. Okay. Either way works for me. Feel pretty comfortable with these. They're enough like yesterday that I don't think we need to do 6 examples like we did yesterday. So as long as you guys are good, I'm going to give you your homework assignment. All right. So for those of you at home, go ahead and after taking notes in your binder, click on load and email me if you have any questions.